Peace, y'all. It is I, the Emma, Energy Master Allah, and you are watching the Leopard in the Mirror, Canticle of the Mutant Guardian. If you don't have your copy already, grab that physical on Amazon. Real book in your hand, baby. This is episode 27. We're still in book 3, The Return of Understanding, and this is Canto 25. Why? The Question That Justifies Light. As always, I am recording these live on Facebook, and then I upload them onto YouTube. So if you are watching on YouTube, go ahead, hit that like, hit that subscribe button, drop me a comment, all of that, and make sure you check out my other lecture series that are on my page, because I hope that you got it by now, if you made it all the way to episode 27, but if you need a little extra help, there's some topics that you might like on there. But let's go ahead, hop over here. I will read through the canto, and then once we do that, we'll jump back to the top and go through it. All right, let's do it. Canto 25. Why? The Question That Justifies Light. He bent the line into a fork and called it why. 3 points of flame, foundation, right and left, meeting at the stem of the spine, where breath remembers its maker. The question is the serpent, coiling upward through the word. He asks, why does he like the devil? And the echo answers, because the devil gives him nothing. Yet, even nothing is a womb, and the womb hides the calculus of gold. 379 years the traitor has sailed inside the blood, selling the memory of sunlight for the weight of its reflection. He promised metal, but delivered myth. He promised gold, but buried fire. The fool took the measure of coins and forgot the rhythm of the spiral. He mistook the lamp for the light, the traitor's tongue for truth. But gold is only the shadow of proportion, and the true treasure was the pulse that beats between 1 and 6 and 18, the golden syllable, the cipher of incarnation. Why asks not for answer, but for resonance. It turns the unknown inside out, so the question becomes a mirror. Each branch of the why is a path, one toward heaven, one toward earth, and the body, the bridge that binds them. To the left flows Ida, silver river of the moon. To the right, Pingala, solar flame of the sun, and between them, the pineal lamp. The single eye of balance, the child of both horizons. So the question becomes its own reply. Why is the devil? To teach us discernment. Why are we African? To remind the world that Asia was once our name. Why are our people still dead? Because we mistake the parable for the proof. Yet in the asking lies awakening. To justify is to set free, to unbind the knot between thought and thing. The why of the body splits sound into meaning, divides vibration into voice. When wisdom breathes through that gate, Allah speaks, and the ocean of speech knows no shore. The child of the universe lifts his head, the leopard's mark now gleaming in his brow, and he asks the only holy question, why not? The cosmos stirs, the two serpents intertwine, and the answer is light becoming form, form becoming word, word becoming man, and man remembering that every question is God folding back into himself to see if he still recognizes his own reflection. All right. Canto 25. All right, so naturally our 25th letter is why. Why is the question most used to justify? Of course, that has to do with the letter Y in the supreme alphabet. And, you know, It's a double entendre. Why? Because it deals with the Y chromosome, whereas yesterday the unknown dealt with the X chromosome. This deals with the Y, so the masculine part, right? He bent the line into a fork and called it Y. So now you got options. So you were going straight and now you bent the road into two options, the left and the right. 3 points of flame. The foundation, right and left, meeting at the stem of the spine where breath remembers its maker. The question is the serpent coiling upward through the word. So if you look at the letter Y, and it has 3 points, and you connect those points to form a triangle around it, essentially what you've done is draw the wireframe 2D projection of a tetrahedron. And in Plato's system that he no doubt learned from the Egyptians and everybody in Africa who contributed to that collective body of knowledge, the Kemetic teachings, if you will, the alchemical meaning of that is flame. Now, usually when it's inverted, so if it's a letter Y, 2 points are going to be at the top and one's going to be at the bottom. So usually when that triangle's inverted, it flips the script and it relates to water. So that's an interesting inversion. And so that is made up with the serpent, because the serpent is typically associated, we've talked about word membrane, but it's also the initiate at the beginning. It is also associated with the roots of the world tree and the waters within the ground. Cooling waters is what it's usually associated with. But it's the vibration of the earth itself. Right? Whereas the top of the tree, the top of the world tree, is associated with flame because that's where the sunlight hits, right? And then you often have an eagle associated with the top of it. So that's where the initiate has reached mastery. And then in addition, in China, that's you can swap that eagle out with a dragon, because that's the mature serpent. The serpent has gotten mature and wise. He's grown horns. He can fly now. The fire theme, of course, because he can breathe fire. But essentially, by him being able to now fly, he has mastered air. He can still swim in the water. He can breathe fire. He has brought together all the elements at this point. This is what that symbolism means. Now, in Kung Fu, in Qigong, anything that had to do with dragon, if it had dragon in the name, it usually has something to do with the spine. So this is code for the spine. Snake, on the other hand, typically is dealing with the use of the arms in that fluid type of way. But when we're talking about the dragon, it usually has something to do with flexing or twisting the spine in order to do that particular technique. Or at least you crossing the center line with the arms. All right, it says where breath remembers its maker, meeting at the stem of the spine. So this is clearly talking about Kundalini right here. The energy that's coiled at the root, the ancestral energy. If you have not properly aligned yourself and purified your channels, if you send too much energy through them wires, you're going to burn yourself out, mess your mind and your body up. So don't play with that. Don't play with that unless you're getting properly initiated. Don't just watch some mess on YouTube and just think it's going to be sweet. You're going to mess yourself up. He asks, why does he like the devil? And the echo answers, because the devil gives him nothing. Yet even nothing is a womb. And the womb hides the calculus of gold. So that is clearly acknowledging that in the definition for why in the supreme alphabet it contains a portion of the 1 to 36. And so within that, it asks the question, why does he like the devil? And then it follows up with, because the devil gives him nothing. Well, you know, it sounds like why would somebody giving you nothing make you like them? And so the question is, what is nothing? See, when we had our conversation about vacuum, the vacuum isn't empty. It's just non-interactive. And so sometimes when we feel like when we're given something, or if we are, if we're given something, we didn't have to do anything for it, or if we're otherwise relinquished of a responsibility, like, oh, you can cut out early, you can go home early, man, clock out. We treat it like we're being done a favor. But all them hours you're missing that you could have been putting in, man, what could you have been growing, right? But if we utilize the nothing we have, you know, all that freedom that you now have as a result of not doing the thing that you was doing, that nothing can become a womb that actually grows something. And then this is the secret here, because you which is more valuable is the question. Is it money or is it time? And see, if money was more important, they wouldn't be paying you for your time. Because you can make money with your money. You know that, right? You know you can gain interest, you can make investments. People into the speculators market, they don't do nothing with their day but guess whether or not some other company gonna make money or not. And then they get paid for this. But again, if your time wasn't valuable to them, they wouldn't be paying you for it. Because if you ever figured out how valuable your time is and how few precious moments we have, like even if you live to be 80 some years, man, that's a fast 80 years in comparison to eternity, right? So it's just something to think about. 379 years, the traitor has sailed inside the blood, selling the memory of sunlight for the weight of its reflection. He promised metal, but delivered myth. He promised gold, but buried fire. So 379 years. So these lessons, so this is, let's see, 1 to 36. So that would have been, I believe that was 1933, because you had so you got the first set in 1931. The 1 to 40 was definitely 1934. Then I believe he said that the 1 to 36 was a little bit before that, in 1933. But the year they essentially trying to get you to look at when it says this 379 years is 1555, when John Locke, an Englishman, came to, I believe it's what is present day Ghana, and he basically kidnapped 5 translators so that England would be able to compete with the Portuguese in the gold trade. And the Akan, who are an Ashanti tribe in West Africa, they have a system called a Brahmo, which is for weighing gold, but more importantly, there's a spiritual aspect to it, like the shape that they mold the gold into, and the symbols that are on those, they have metaphysical significance, and there's a system, a highly sophisticated system of thought associated with that embeds their cosmology and everything else. And so this white man ain't cared nothing about that. He just wanted to get that gold. And so it is said that the actions of John Locke and the acquisition of these traders were a key stepping stone for what would later become the transatlantic slave trade. Like you already kind of had it warming up with like the Dutch and whoever else, and then you had Columbus's voyage. But in terms of actually being able to make the headway into the continent that was necessary in order for it to become what it became, it is largely credited to this action by John Locke. And so these people, you hear the saying, they took our gold and gave us the Bibles. And the irony of it, of course, being that what they brought back was already, it was already in the teachers of the continent. We already had these stories. You got the reruns and then brought them back to us like it was brand new. And some people fell for it. They did. But the real value was the math that's in it. If you know the structure that's in it, you can apply it in a number of ways, and then you'll realize that it's actually a diagram of your body. The word is written within you. And I don't mean that as a metaphor. If you actually understand the grid, how the body is organized, and which phonemes, which sounds that you make with the mouth, how they direct sound through the body, you'll find that this is a very intricate system that has mathematical properties based on the geometric relationships of your body that can themselves be translated alphanumerically into some of the scriptures that you are aware of. It is something that very much resembles modern computing, but it's just done in a straight math fashion. But there was definitely some advanced stuff going on with that, and we just didn't realize how valuable that was to us. The fool took the measure of coins and forgot the rhythm of the spiral. He mistook the lamp for the light, the trader's tongue for truth. But gold is only the shadow of proportion, and the true treasure was the pulse that beats between 1 and 6 and 18, the golden syllable, the cipher of incarnation. So 1618, that is clearly a reference to the golden ratio, which is 1.6180339, on and on. Also, that is a reference to Matthew 16:18, where Jesus tells Peter he'll be the rock on which he builds his church. So that rock is calculus. Because they're using the play on words right there. Peter and rock. Whatever. Peter's name already means rock. A stone is talking about the calculus. Calculus is the math of change over time. The entire Bible is heavily entrenched with astronomical knowledge and precession cycles. The transition from Aries to Pisces is the transition from the lamb to, so the sacrificial lamb becomes the one who can swim between the worlds. So the one who can move between the primordial waters and walk on those waters. So there's a whole thing that when you're moving from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces, it always deals with like a messianic figure, like a central authority when it comes to, the religion and everything else. So you get like the coming of Christ. But as you move into the age of Aquarius, that singular focus on one figure instead becomes democratized. So you start moving out of the God King era into the democratic era where everybody is their own priest. Not everybody just has their own opinion, but I'm saying everybody is mature enough spiritually and consciously to be able to govern themselves. And so what you'll find is that the 5% Nation is one of those movements that was ahead of the curve. Because it really got, if I'm being honest, you really have up until about 2160 CE. So in about 130 years, that's when it was going to be completely. But it doesn't just wait until 2160 to start transitioning. So it's already transitioning over the course of a couple hundred years. And so this is why you see the old system starting to dismantle, this idea of the one guy in charge. So you see how they messing up in the Oval Office right now. Like that whole paradigm is starting to shift. I've talked about Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther run, and it deals pretty deeply with like that and the Christopher Knight run that's out now, the World to Come. They both deal with this idea of the people wanting to move into a democratic situation in Wakanda. You know, they've had the idea of the royal family and the God King who was anointed by Bast herself and all of this. The people want, you know, power for themselves. They've adopted revolutionary ideas, some of which very likely from the West, but you got philosophers in Wakanda that, you know, wrote things, and then that's what they're dealing with. But that is the symptoms of the coming of the age of Aquarius. So whether you sign, you know, subscribe to Zodiac or not or whatever, there's a lot more to it. If you think about the fact that stars, the way that stars keep from collapsing into their own gravity is that they have an outward electrostatic push or whatever that's stronger than their gravity. And this essentially causes acoustic waves to pass through the star, through the plasma of the star. And in a lot of ways, this is akin to how a microphone translates electricity into sound, and vice versa. And so a star is doing that. So it's doing very deep acoustic waves. So this is sound. So it's releasing sound. And because there isn't a traditional medium like an audible medium, especially you don't necessarily hear it, but these waves are still traveling through the its vacuum potential. And I don't know when this is going to come out as a, you know, widely understood thing, but that's essentially what that light is. So if you think of light as inaudible sound, what happens when light interacts with electrons, like it interacts with material like your melanin that is able to convert that light information. What it does is it causes an excitation on that surface that generates heat, and then that heat creates vibrations, creates a wave called a photon, a collective excitation or whatever. And so that is essentially what sound is for us. And so when those excitations meet certain parameters or whatever, it becomes audible. At a certain frequency, at a certain speed, it becomes audible. Okay, and so you've got this It's concept. But anyways, those, so as the Earth, see the Earth, it wobbles, its axis tilts at about 11 degrees, and because of this, it switches its relationship with the stars that surround us. So it's rotating and moving through this approximately 26,000 year cycle that can be cut up into 12 parts, and that's where you get your zodiac. And depending on our position relative to these, there's an entirely different acoustic environment. So you're just soaking up both radiation and acoustic vibrations that have a specific organization about them. Now, I think I've mentioned in the past that while vision and light are cool for experiencing the 3D world that we all live in right here, higher dimensions, like 4 dimensions and on, we can't perceive that with the eye. It's hard for us to visualize that. And so sound is able to map those environments because it has mathematical relationships. It can reflect off of a 4D object. It doesn't care whether you can see it or not. That's irrelevant as far as sound is concerned. And so part of your brain still is able to pick up on that and be able to convert that reflection information into usable information. And so often what it'll do is, let's say like you're having like an out-of-body experience or, related type of practices. What your brain is able to do is able to take that 4-dimension information and step it down into a 3D representation of it. And if you want to keep going with that, you can flatten that into a 2D representation, a shadow of that object, and then you can examine certain relationships. But it's representational geometry at that point. But the actual experience of it, you can only really do that with audio. Okay, and so when I say acoustic environment, it is literally giving you environmental information or whatever. So these are locations. So you'll hear in the OBE space about how the stars are actually portals and that they're made of sound and they're more like ripples in the firmament. So what that is the acoustic waves of the stars, they become a 2D map in the waters of the atmosphere. And that creates a certain pattern of excitation in the atmosphere, naturally. And so we primarily interact with that combination of the Earth's field and the acoustic information that gets applied to that atmosphere, and it has a certain effect on us because the Schumann resonance of the Earth is equal to our alpha and theta waves, and our attentiveness, our waking brainwave state is the second harmonic of that Schumann resonance. So it's proportional in that way. And so anything that's causing fluctuations or, impacting that sound that our consciousness is essentially syncing up with, it's essentially shaping the reality. So unbeknownst to the collective, in a lot of cases, there's just certain stuff that happens, or at least has a higher probability of happening during specific ages. So you can, it's not beyond the reaches of a scientific explanation, but the way that information has been preserved by the people who are in the know, because the same thing comes around every 26,000 years. So around the time when the Ashango bone was being made, 26,000 years later is the time of Christ. So a lot of the same things that were happening in that era before that, it's happening then and it's still happening now. We're still within that that 2,160 year cycle. You see what I'm saying? So we're coming to the tail end of it. So we're seeing that transition out of it. That's how it started out. But eventually we've got to move to the next version where we got to take responsibility. So that's essentially what's happening at the end of Revelation. But what's supposed to be happening is, you start to get your sovereignty. Everybody knows how to take care of themselves properly. Why ask not for answer, but for resonance? It turns the unknown inside out, so the question becomes a mirror. Each branch of the why is a path, one toward heaven, one toward earth, and the body, the bridge that binds them. Turns that unknown inside out. Once that Y goes into that X, yes, a person will come out. But we ask questions. See, that's the wisest thing you could do. They say you should never believe anybody that says they have all the answers, because that means they're not creating anything, and then they don't want you creating anything either. Because in order for you to have all the answers, that means that you cut out what can, come in newly. But a person who asks why has the opportunity to gain something they did not have before that. And we often look for a why, a reason, when you don't necessarily need a reason to act, but why is what leads to knowing. So something to think about. You may have that egg, but the why causes it to accumulate matter into a body. One toward heaven, one toward earth. So the spiritual, the mental, all of that, your physical flesh, the body that is the bridge between the vibrations and lights of the heavens. I ain't talking about no metaphysical heavens. I'm talking about the skies, the whole shebang-a-bang. To the left flows Ida, silver river of the moon. To the right, Pingala, solar flame of the sun. And between them, the pineal lamp, the single eye of balance, the child of both horizons. So that is talking about the feminine and the masculine energies, the energy channels that run upward, coiling around the spine. And in the center, you have Sushumna, which is the central channel that runs up the spine and then allows vibration to concentrate at the pineal, take advantage of those calcite crystals that are embedded in it, and create a piezoelectric current that essentially functions like that electrostatic that I talked about with the star. So it causes an acoustic wave to spread out through the brain, and the brain is then able to map that, and specific sounds will create specific acoustic environments that you end up discovering is navigable, meaning you can enter a mind state that allows you to be able to move about their frequency, see what's out there when you are attuned to that instead of the normal tune that you are plugged into. Okay. So the question becomes its own reply. Why is the devil? To teach us discernment. Why are we African? To remind the world that Asia was once our name. Why are our people still dead? Because we mistake the parable for the proof. So again, it's a couple questions that are asked in that degree. So why is the devil? So the question is asked, why then make devil? And as the story goes, part of the reason was so that we could prove we were God. So we had gotten to this level of hubris. And just like today, you have people who say this, say the black man's God or whatever else, but then they don't fully understand what's really being said there. And it becomes something of arrogance and domineering attitude, when essentially what it is a mirror. It's to say, okay, am I this simply because of the color of my skin? Or is there a part that I have to activate? See, depending on your answer to that question, that determines what hope you have for a better future for this entire world. Because if you understand that the devil too is a state of mind, you realize to take the devil off the planet is to say that you're taking it off your mind. Devil is the slanderer. So if you don't have a proper understanding of language, if you don't have a proper understanding of scripture, that's when it becomes a lie. Because it has an embedded structure, to have truth aligned within it. But if you have an incorrect understanding of it, it does you absolutely no good. And that's where most of the trouble is coming, isn't for lack of truth within it. It's for lack of understanding. Why are we African? So they say this word African is a later assignment by the Greeks or whoever else, and the world was called Asia. So it isn't just talking about like China and all that. No, the whole world was Asia because it simply meant land. Africa is itself a hidden code, because if you look at that AFR, so that's the first letter, the sixth letter, and the 18th letter. Did we not just talk about 1, 6, and 18 just a few lines ago? Right up here. The beats between the 1 and the 6 and 18, that is A, F, and R. So Africa is itself an approximation of the golden ratio. I bet you didn't know that. So they were slick trying to trick you into abandoning that. Man, like, oh, that ain't what we're called. Uh-huh. Tone it down. Lower that hubris before you get Atlantis. Why are our people still dead? That's mentally dead. We ain't talking about trying to resurrect physically dead people. Their bodies are rotted. They don't want that no more. You gotta wake the mentally dead so they can be free in life. You have to be reborn. You were born once. Now you gotta be reborn. Which means you gotta die to your old self. Because we mistake the parable for the proof. The story isn't the evidence. The evidence is the evidence. Anybody can tell a story. Yet in the asking lies awakening. You gotta ask questions. To justify is to set free. That's alignment. To unbind the knot between thought and thing. Is that really your thing, or is it just a thought in your experience? You think $1 million exists, but if you've never actually seen $1 million, it's just an idea for you. That's not to say it doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist for you, really. It exists as a possibility, but if you can't lay hands on it, it's still just a thought for you. So you got to be able to decouple those things that are simply in thought form for you from the things that are actually manifested and tangible for you, so that you know what you can work with, and you know how people can relate to you. They can't relate to your thought. They can relate to your manifestation. So you got to convert that thought into some form of manifestation, even if it's a description. It ain't doing them no good in your head. The why of the body splits sound into meaning. So it divides vibration into voice. The y-axis is what we're talking about here, where the spine runs vertical. When wisdom breathes through that gate, Allah speaks in the ocean of speech, knows no shore. So that we just talked about wisdom the other day in the supreme alphabet with regards to when Allah speaks, it's like an ocean that'll never run dry. The child of universe lifts his head, the leopard's mark now gleaming in his brow, and he asks the only holy question. Why not? We asked why. Well, shoot, why not? The cosmos stirs, the two serpents intertwine, and the answer is light becoming form, form becoming word, word becoming man, and man remembering that every question is God folding back into himself to see if he still recognizes his own reflection. So it's talking about the twisting, the double helix of the DNA is essentially a light path, a wave guide that mirrors the binary orbits of stars like Sirius A and B. The sun, the Earth and the Moon form a binary. So as they move around the Earth or whatever, it creates that spiraling pattern. But that's happening in every single one of your cells in the form of DNA. Universe lift his head. Remember, the universe is the child. The leopard's mark now gleaming in his brow. That is the hippocampus, the part that maps the environment as well as the language. It says, why not? So this is a freeing statement, because now he can tell himself why not. Now you can dream. Now you can see possibility where there once seemed to be none. Light becoming form, so it's starting to couple, it's starting to interact with the matter. Solidify that. Particles solidifying. In our experience, at least, it's all still vibration, but the more dense that vibration, the more quote unquote real it is in our subjective experience, and we relate to it as if it is object. Word becoming man, that vibration went into the egg. The oscillation of that calcium ion donated by their sperms now causing that egg to multiply. DNA exchange, DNA combining into that child, that universe, so that God can see himself reflected in what he created. Father and Son passing through that portal that is Mother. And on that note, y'all, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Tomorrow we are moving to Canto 26, which will deal with the final letter of the supreme alphabet, which is zigzag zig. But it's not the last canto. So what's up with them last few? You'll just have to stick around and find out. But tomorrow is zigzag zig, y'all. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you haven't already. Tell me what you think in the comments. Do you have any questions? We just talked about the value of a question. Feel free to ask. But until then, I'll see you next time, y'all. Peace.